Hey everyone, and welcome back to the EMT Spot's Blood Pressure Podcast. I'm Samuel Harrison.
And I'm Olivia Harper.
And today we're diving into a question that might have you raising an eyebrow. Can the color of your clothes really mess with your blood pressure?
It sounds a little out there,
It does, right?
but there's some really interesting research that suggests color can impact us in ways that go way beyond just what we see.
So when we think about color, I go back to like high school biology. You know, those cone cells in our eyes, the ones that help us differentiate between red and green and blue.
Exactly. Those cones are our color detectors.
Yeah.
They're sensitive to different wavelengths of light, and that's how our brain interprets the whole rainbow of colors.
Yeah.
But get this.
Yeah.
It turns out there's another pathway, a hidden route that connects our eyes to a completely different part of the brain, the hypothalamus.
Now, wait a minute. The hypothalamus, that's the control center for all sorts of things like body temperature, sleep, even hormone production, right?
You got it. And that's where things start to get really interesting. Because this pathway means that our eyes aren't just sending signals to the visual part of our brain, but also directly to this master regulator, the hypothalamus.
So you're telling me that what we see can actually trigger hormonal responses?
It's wild, right? And since hormones can definitely influence blood pressure, well, you can start to see where this is going.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection here, but how does color specifically fit into all of this?
Well, research has shown that certain colors, especially blue and green light, can really kickstart those hypothalamic responses. Ever notice how staring at your phone before bed makes it harder to fall asleep?
Oh yeah, tell me about it.
That's because that blue light is messing with your hormones. It triggers the release of cortisol, our wake-up hormone, and suppresses melatonin, the one that helps us drift off.
Ah, so that's the science behind all those blue light blocking glasses and night mode settings.
Exactly. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. Professor Stephen Westland at the University of Leeds did some research that showed different colored lights can actually cause measurable changes in both heart rate and blood pressure.
Seriously? So we're talking about actual physiological changes, not just some subjective feeling.
That's right. And his research found that red light seems to rev things up, increasing heart rate.
While blue light kind of chills things out.
You got blue light tends to lower heart rate. And since heart rate and blood pressure are often linked, it's not a huge leap to think that blue light might also have a calming effect on blood pressure.
Okay, so I'm following you so far.
Yeah.
But how does all this connect back to the clothes we wear? I mean, unless my shirt is secretly a disco ball, I don't think it's emitting beams of light.
Good point. It's true that Professor Westland's research focused on direct exposure to colored light, not the reflected light from clothing. But it does raise the question, could the colors we surround ourselves with, even the ones we wear, have some kind of subtle effect on our bodies?
So even though my bright red shirt isn't blasting me with red light waves, my brain's interpretation of that color could still trigger some kind of response.
It's definitely possible. Our brains are incredibly complex, and how we perceive color is shaped by all sorts of things: personal experiences, cultural associations, even our mood at any given moment.
That actually reminds me of a student essay we came across. It explored how different colors affected people's blood pressure. And they found that red and yellow seemed to increase it, blue decreased it, and green and black had more fluctuating effects.
Isn't that interesting? While student essays aren't exactly scientific gold standards, they can definitely give us some food for thought. This one in particular raises the question of whether our personal associations with certain colors, those gut feelings we get based on our own experiences and cultural background, could actually play a role in how our bodies react.
So maybe someone who had a bad experience associated with the color green might actually see their blood pressure spike when they wear a green shirt, even if green is generally considered a calming color.
Exactly. It just goes to show how complex this whole topic is and how differently we can respond to color. It really emphasizes the need for more research to unpack this fascinating interplay between color perception, our physical bodies, and our minds. And speaking of different responses, we were talking about personal experiences and how those can shape our perception of color.
Yeah.
Well, there are some real-world examples of how this connection between color and light is being put into practice. Have you ever heard about those blue lights they installed on train platforms in Japan?
Vaguely. I think I remember something about it. What's the story there?
So back in 2009, they started putting these blue lights on platforms along the Yamanote line in Tokyo.
Okay.
And the idea was that if blue light can create a sense of calmness and maybe even reduce impulsive behavior, like some studies suggest, it could potentially help prevent suicides.
Wow. That's a really interesting approach. Did it actually work?
It's hard to say for sure, but the data is pretty promising. Suicide rates at those stations with the blue lights apparently dropped significantly.
Mm.
And Gatwick Airport in the UK, they actually adopted the same blue light strategy for their train platforms. So there's definitely some belief in its potential.
That's pretty incredible if it's true. But I guess it's important to remember that correlation doesn't always equal causation, right? There could be other factors involved in that decrease in suicides.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why we always need more research. A good example is a study that was done at the University of Leeds, led by Nicholas Ciccone.
Okay.
They specifically looked at whether different colored lighting could have an effect on impulsivity.
Interesting. So what did they find?
Their results were kind of surprising. Actually, they were inconclusive.
Really?
Yeah, they didn't find any clear evidence that colored lighting, whether it was blue or any other color, had a significant impact on impulsive behavior.
So it sounds like we still have a lot to learn about how color affects our behavior and our bodies.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
a relatively new area of research, and there's just so much to consider. But I think it's safe to say that color has the potential to influence us in ways we might not even be aware of, both physically and mentally.
It makes you wonder, beyond the colors we can see, are there other ways that light might be affecting us? I mean, there's this whole spectrum of electromagnetic radiation that our eyes can't even perceive.
That's a great point. You've got infrared, ultraviolet microwaves, radio waves. All of those are forms of light, essentially just ones that we can't see. And there's more and more evidence suggesting that some of these invisible wavelengths can interact with our bodies in ways we're just starting to understand.
So you're saying there could be this whole world of light, well, or at least electromagnetic radiation that's constantly influencing us, and we're totally clueless.
It's a mind-blowing thought, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, what if we could somehow tap into that unseen world of color? What possibilities might that hold?
Now that's a question for another deep dive.
Yeah, maybe sometime in the future.
Definitely. But for today, we've explored some fascinating research and ideas about how color, both the visible and the invisible, might be playing a role in our lives, including its potential impact on our blood pressure. It's definitely a topic that deserves more investigation. And while the science is still developing, I think it's a good reminder to be mindful of the colors we choose to surround ourselves with and to pay attention to how they make us feel.
Great advice. So to sum it all up, we've learned that while the direct connection between the color of your clothes and your blood pressure is still a bit of a mystery, there's definitely evidence that color can impact our bodies and minds in some pretty amazing ways.
The research on colored light and its effects on things like heart rate and blood pressure is especially intriguing, and it opens up a whole new way of thinking about how our environment can affect our overall health and well-being.
And who knows, maybe someday we'll have a better understanding of how to use color to improve our lives in ways we can't even imagine yet. But for now, we'll have to keep exploring and asking questions.
Absolutely. The journey of discovery is half the fun.
That's a great way to put it. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode of the EMT Spot's Blood Pressure Podcast. I'm Samuel Harrison.
And I'm Olivia Harper.
Thanks for joining us on this fascinating deep dive into the world of color and its potential impact on blood pressure. Make sure to subscribe, like, comment, and share this episode with anyone who might be interested. We'll catch you next time. So where does all this leave us when it comes to choosing what to wear? Should we all be swapping out our red shirts for blue ones in hopes of keeping our blood pressure down?
Well, I wouldn't rush to overhaul your wardrobe just yet. Remember those studies we talked about? They focused on direct light exposure, not just the color of your clothes. Plus, everyone reacts to color a little differently. There are so many factors involved that it's tough to say for sure how one specific color is going to affect everyone's blood pressure.
So it sounds like it's more about being aware of how color might affect us rather than trying to follow some strict set of rules.
Exactly. It's all about tuning into how different colors make you feel. Do you find yourself feeling more energized in a room with bright, warm colors? More relaxed in a space with cool, calming tones? Paying attention to those subtle shifts in your mood and energy levels can help you make smarter choices about the colors you surround yourself with, not just your clothes, but also things like the way you decorate your home.
So it's like adding this whole other level of awareness to our daily lives, realizing that color isn't just about aesthetics, but could actually have these real physiological and psychological effects.
Precisely. And as we learn more about this fascinating connection between color, light, and our bodies, who knows what we might discover? Maybe someday we'll be able to harness the power of color to improve our health and well-being in ways we can't even imagine right now.
That's a pretty amazing thought. It seems like this deep dive has actually given us more questions than answers, but in a good way.
I agree. It's definitely sparked my curiosity about something we often take for granted.
Well said. So on that note, we've come to the end of our exploration into the world of color. and its potential impact on blood pressure.
It's been great diving into this with you.
Likewise, I'm Samuel Harrison.
And I'm Olivia Harper.
Thank you so much for joining us on the TheEMTSpot's Blood Pressure Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share this episode with anyone who might find it interesting. Until next time, stay curious.